for joining me. I have my friend Veronica Trevilla. She is the founder of Focused Minded Coaching. She is a lifestyle coach. And Veronica, you are also my friend from my life coach company with Tanya Lee. I talk about a lot on my podcast. Welcome. Thank you so much for being a part of my show today. Can you
Thank
tell us a
you.
little bit about yourself?
Yes, thank you for having me, Christine. This is so exciting. I love collaborating, especially with my friends. That makes it even more special and more intimate. So my name is Veronica, as Christine said. I am the founder of Focused Mind Coaching, and I help women create a lifestyle to enhance their abilities to overcome distraction in a natural way that doesn't feel overwhelming or doesn't feel like work. I really am in tune with how the ADHD brain works. I have 20 years of clinical experience diagnosing ADHD, treating ADHD, and counseling ADHD. And when I realized that I myself had ADHD and never been diagnosed, and was the mom of two ADHD kids, and also an expert in it from the medical side, I realized what a special place I was in, what a special opportunity I had to reach out to other women and coach women through dealing with ADHD. Because when you have trouble, I mean, we all have trouble focusing and concentrating from time to time, whether you have ADHD or not. That's just the nature of our society with all of our pings and notifications and emails and texts and social media and reels and threads and this and that, that a lot of us have difficulty focusing these days, even without being formally diagnosed with ADHD. So I help women to navigate all of that with a sense of calm, a sense of ease, so that they can develop what I call focus resilience, which is my own term that I kind
I
of
like that.
wrote. And what I mean by focus resilience is, you know, the ability to be working on and pursuing a goal and getting distracted and off track, and then being able to turn and pivot and come back without feeling, without beating yourself up, without feeling the guilt or the shame, or the anxiety that creates, right?
Yes.
And the negative self-concept that creates over time, especially because when you have difficulty focusing and that's chronic, you might forget about what your goal was, even if it was important to you. You know, the longer you stay distracted and you stay away from your course, the easier it is to just throw up your hands and just say, oh, you know, what was the point of that? What was I even thinking? Am I even able to accomplish X, Y, or Z, whatever it is, because it's unique for all of us. So
Right.
I really want to get the message out there and help other women to work through that and to develop that, because developing that ability to pivot and come back and refocus and start where you left off, or even start over in some cases. I know I've started over lots of times. I think that's a skill. And I think it's a skill that also requires a lot of emotional flexibility and an emotional softness that we have to allow ourselves to have toward ourselves, the same way we have toward our children and toward
Oh,
our other
yes.
loved ones, right? We have
It's
that
much
emotional
harder.
softness.
It
Yeah.
is much harder when we're looking at ourselves. I've done podcasts about that. If I was talking to my children, I would be thinking in one way, but when I talk to myself or I'm thinking about myself, I have different expectations than I would for my children. And I think that's an important thing to remember is I would never I would never expect the same things of my kids that I expect of myself or friends or anybody for that matter that I would
Right.
expect from myself. And it's
Hmm.
very unrealistic to think that I should be held to that standard, but I know I'm not the only one that does that.
Yeah, no.
When we were talking the other day in our conversation, getting ready to prepare for this, my focus for this podcast is we're in January. We have the new
Hmm.
year, and everybody's so excited. It's a wonderful time to start fresh. But I myself, I started season 2 of this podcast in October. Since October, I have been run over multiple times with responsibilities. Then the holidays came and all of these things happened. And I understand, I have a goal and I have all these
Mhm.
other things that bring along life and starting over and all that stuff. And as we were talking, I was so encouraged by what you do for a living and how your views are in SOSI, in our life coaching company. They
Mhm.
talk about the word of the year. I had never heard about the word of the year until I joined SOSI, and I was so enchanted by that idea. I thought it was fantastic, and it was. This year, I didn't want to do that. I'm so used to now setting extraordinary goals and being very
Mhm.
focused for the year. I was tired. I was just
Mm.
exhausted. And as we were talking, I've been hearing other people saying the same thing, and I was very surprised that you have a different outlook for this year as well. You aren't the only
Mhm.
one who didn't pick a word of the year, and I just want to ask you about that. So what made
Yeah,
you
yeah.
decide not to choose a word of the year this year?
Well, actually, I did choose a word of the year,
Okay.
but, but, but with a different intention than I ever have. And my main thing this year is to not allow myself to feel pressured by external um, time frames. And what I mean by that is like, we use my word of the year, by the way, is abundance. And that's a whole different conversation.
Okay.
But it's not a word where I look, it didn't come with a specific timeline. Like I want to have, built my business to this level by this date, or I want
Okay.
to um, pay off this much debt by this date, or I want to have this much in savings. And it's not even abundance, even from a monetary standpoint, right? But that's kind of a separate topic. But my outlook in coming toward the new year is allowing myself to have enough time to rest and recover between big shifts, between big events, between
Mhm.
big demanding times of the year. So, for example, from Thanksgiving, basically all the way to New Year's, it's just like our lives are a go, 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 even harder than they are in a regular time of the year when we don't have all these holidays back to back to back. We already schedule ourselves and have so many responsibilities. We already have goals. We already, do things for our families. We run our households. We do our jobs. But on top of that, during the holidays, we have extra family obligations for seeing extended family.
Mhm.
And I don't say that in a negative way. It's a beautiful thing. I love the holidays, but through it and by the end of it, I feel completely depleted emotionally and physically and mentally, no matter how well I feel I've prepared for it all in heading into it. Like this year, I started preparing mentally for it probably by the end of September, and that included like being more organized with my Christmas shopping for the first time in a long time. And making sure that I was able to give in the way that I wanted to give of myself throughout the holidays, and that not just with gifts, but with my energy, with my time, with attention.
Mm.
Um, and even in preparing ahead of time in order to help prevent some of that feeling of rush and that feeling of like, oh my gosh, I have to finish shopping by Black Friday or by Cyber Monday, or, thank goodness so many companies extended Black Friday, and it felt like the whole month of November, right?
Yeah.
But then society has ingrained in us that, okay, now it's January 1st, and you have to start on your new goals or your new resolutions, or you're living by the theme of your word of your year, by January 1st, you've got to wake up that day and, okay, today's the day I'm going to start losing 20 pounds, or today's the day I'm going to make my debt payoff plan, or today's the day I'm going to, redo my house or declutter all the closets, whatever that goal is. And I feel like because society has always put that pressure on us, it just adds to it. It doesn't allow us to fully enjoy every minute and be mindful, and also doesn't give us permission to rest after all of that go, 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 go.
No, it's
Give,
on to
give,
something
give,
else.
give, right?
Yeah.
And so my feeling this year was, I'm going to allow myself to be gentle with my own personal timeline. And I don't have to have all my goals and a plan figured out by January 1st. And I don't have to, if it happens by the 15th, or if I need a whole month to rest, because I do still like the idea of creating a fresh start with fresh goals. It's not that I don't like that idea. I love that.
Right.
And I think the beginning of the year is a beautiful time to do that, but it is a little bit arbitrary. And I think that we have to remind ourselves that we have the freedom to choose the starting point at any time that feels best for us and right for us. And I feel like when you are, as someone who coaches women in reaching goals, creating goals, and I myself have practiced this many years and worked on my own, as I've worked on my own personal growth and self-development, for me anyway, when I'm going to create a goal for myself or a plan, even that takes preparation leading up to it. And this year, I was not going to put that extra pressure on myself during the holiday season. And my day job is still in healthcare, so I don't really get much of a break, like I take a few days off to be with family, and I come back, and because I was off maybe during Christmas week, that means I have to work New Year's week. So then I came back and I worked that whole week at my day job and didn't have any downtime with travel and with, all of those things that we need transition time. So
Right.
my big shift this year was, I don't have to create miracles on January 1st. And I don't even have to have the intention by January 1st. I need to
I love that.
enjoy it. I need to enjoy January 1st. I need to
Yes.
be grateful that I have a fresh start, and that we have a new year to look forward to, and a lot of shifts and change and growth, as I always do. But if I actually start taking off with my goals on February 1st, that is totally okay too.
I love that idea that we're not on a specific timeline. I know it's very common if you've got goals and you say, okay, well, January 1st, I'm going to stop eating junk food and I'm going to lose all this weight. And then if you don't do it January 1st, you can get into a cycle of disappointment in yourself. And then that can lead to a shame spiral. And then, okay, well, next week I'm going to do it. And then putting it off because it's not fitting a timeline. And I think it's really worth sharing that we're not on the arbitrary timeline. If it's something that we want to do, and I talk about my why a lot, that's one thing from Tanya. It made such a huge difference in me to know my why for certain things. And it just really sharpens the focus and helps you to have a good perspective. I started season 2 of this podcast in October. I've been doing so many things behind the scenes, and nobody would have any idea that anything's going on because I can't get enough traction to get it out there necessarily. But that understanding of the why, and that's what keeps me going, that it's okay if I want to be able to put out a podcast every week, but that doesn't stop me from going several months later and coming back in like, hey, here I am. So
there you go.
I love the idea of reminding people that it's not it's not a calendar thing that your hopes, your
Mhm.
dreams, they don't expire. And
That's right.
when it came time for the word of the year, my very first year, I was so excited and just enthusiastic about the whole thing. I loved the idea, and it was the first time I ever did it. So for me, it was extremely meaningful. And then last year, I had that feeling like, okay, I have to pick a new word because that's what I'm supposed to do now. And I picked a word that I thought was going to be really good, and it wasn't. And I realized I wasn't done with the first word. So
Oh
I
my
started
gosh.
thinking about that, and I really feel like even this year, I'm still not finished with that first word yet. I haven't
And that's
fully
okay.
absorbed it.
Hmm.
So this year I again was like, okay, well, maybe I don't need to do that. And the goals, the extraordinary goals, I've had them for a while, but instead of revisiting, are they big enough? Do I need to redo that? It was investigating my why. Do I still feel that way? Do I still want these things? And being
Hmm.
able to look at it that way. And it was very refreshing for me that I didn't feel like, oh geez, well, I didn't finish 2024 as strong as I had hoped I could. So going into 2025, I was a little exhausted with everything that was going on, and there's every opportunity that you could get discouraged because, geez, I thought I'd be so much further along. And I hear that from so many of my listeners that they have this feeling like there's this timeline that they have to follow. And if they're not further along, it starts that feeling of, well, maybe I shouldn't do it, or I'm not doing it right. And I
Hmm.
was just wanting to know, do you have anything that you can add to that to help us to stay on track, to remember our why and to stay the course?
I love that. Thank you, Christine. That's an excellent question. And I just want to also say before I answer that question, which I do, yes, have a technique for that. Um, I think what you put it beautifully when you said reminding myself of my why. And that is an excellent practice to ask yourself every time that you find yourself veering off course for whatever reason, because we all have good reasons and we have some not so good reasons. But the point is that when you realize and that, oh, I'm off course, why was I working on this? And what is my why for working on this? What and why do I want that?
Mhm.
And kind of really asking yourself why at least 3 times so that you're really getting to the deep core of what is the true why, so that you can reveal that to yourself. Because sometimes the superficial answer, the
Mhm.
first answer of our first why is
Mhm.
superficial. And the real, if you say, well, why do I want that? Well, because of, this. But why do I want that? Oh,
Mhm.
because what I really want is this. And
Mhm.
so now I know that it's going to be maybe a 3-step process to get there, or to go backwards and really peel back the layers of what your why is. But asking yourself why and reminding yourself of why, just like you said, yes, is a beautiful technique, and it's a practice that more of us should do more often. And to ask ourselves why without judgment. So kudos to
Yes.
you for
Thank you.
practicing that, because I
But yeah,
agree that that is such an important and it's an
what you just what you just added with the without judgment, I learned that from being in therapy for so long, is that I was judging myself for some of the things that I was doing and the why. And I always try to remind my listeners to look at that and examine it, but don't judge yourself, because sometimes
Mhm.
when you get to know yourself a little better, you realize, okay, well, I don't really need to be doing that. But if you're constantly judging yourself, then you're never going to get away from that negative self-talk into a flow state where you can just let it be. Just it is what it
Yeah,
is.
and
And
accept it.
there's
Mhm.
yeah, and get to know yourself better. Because if you're judging yourself, you're going to stop getting to know yourself real quick.
That's true. That's true. And you're going to keep the cycle of self-sabotage. So that's why that piece is so important. But one of the methods that I started coaching on last year that I developed were the 3 S's to keep us to keep our focus sharp and to develop sharper focus throughout our lives were just 3 simple S's that you can practice every single day. And there are some of them seem obvious, but number 1 is sleep. And that has to do directly with focus and the biological, reasons why we need sleep, the neurological reasons why our brain needs sleep, and all of the wonderful functions that our brain performs while we are asleep, that until I started really studying it deeply, I knew sleep was important, but I didn't know all of the different, components of neuroplasticity and neurological development, that even as we age, why that sleep is so important. It's not just important when you're developing in early childhood, it's important throughout your lifetime, but maybe that's a topic for a different podcast.
I'd be interested in talking about that.
Yeah,
for sure.
yeah, it's really fascinating. The second S is study. And when I say study, I don't mean like study your notes for your test tomorrow. I don't mean study. What I mean is like study your thoughts, study your own intentions. And why that became so important to me and why I use it as one of the pillars is that I had, in my personal growth journey, and possibly in yours too, I had started journaling a lot years ago when I first found life coaching, and I wanted to create certain practices, and I love to write. So I would just pick up a notebook and start journaling. And I tried to do that every day. And I now don't do it every day, but I do it several times a week. And I found that I had at some point journals and journals and journals full of my thoughts. And I was still in the same place that I was when I started writing those journals. Not much had changed. A little bit had changed, as life does. But like the first maybe 3 to 4 years, nothing was really shifting for me. And I'm going back to like 2016 to 2019, when I was like, I was getting better. I was working on things. This was before Focused Mind coaching, but I would have all of these like literally journal notebooks, that you get at the store, just blank.
I have them too.
And I hadn't felt like it was like you mentioned, I didn't feel like I was far enough along. And I thought, what is going on? So one day I realized, okay, I'm just going to declutter all these, and I didn't know what to do with them. Maybe I should put them in the recycling bin. Maybe I should keep them. I don't want anyone else to ever read them. But the key there is that I had never gone back and read them. I had never studied my own thoughts. I had never studied. And when I went back and read what I had written 2 years before, 3 years before, I realized I'm writing the same thing basically in the same cycles. And I'm going through the same cycles. I'm letting you know what my experience was.
Oh my,
I was not studying what my intentions were. I was writing them out. And that's part of what is important. And I'm not saying don't journal, but we have to study what we write, especially if you're like me and you have ADD and you forget. We forget. I don't remember necessarily what I wrote yesterday in my journal, unless I go back and look at it. What was I grateful for 2 weeks ago? What was I grateful for 5 years ago? What were some goals I had? What were some visions of my life? And unless you go back and create time to study your journal, or study your vision board, or study your mission statement, or study your vision statement, or study your business plan, or study whatever it is you want to study that you have created, you must study your own thoughts in that way, or your own intentions or your own creations, at least once a day, at least for a few minutes. So I don't necessarily go back and now make time to read my entire journal every morning, but I'll flip back a couple pages and say, what was I thinking last month? And that might prompt me to actually write something new and deeper and more profound today. It might prompt me to like really get back on track. And just that simple practice of studying my own thoughts and my own intentions has really, that's been one of the game changers for me in developing true transformation in my life, because that's really helped me to come back and focus, find my focus again, develop that focus resilience on what it is I want my future to look like. So simple words, study.
Okay.
Sleep, study. The third S is select, but study is that key component. And select just means being very selective in what activities you partake in that given day, and just really being intentional about selecting what you want to do and protecting that. And that gets more into the boundaries side of things. But sleep, study, select. And I think that if women just can ask themselves their why again every day, like you mentioned, and also go back and study what are my intentions, what are my goals. And even if you don't have 5 journals to read through or whatever, it doesn't matter. You can study what you wrote yesterday. Just review that, because oftentimes we don't go back and review it.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Study
Thank
yourself,
you so much.
study your thoughts. Mm-hmm.
Yes, absolutely. I know one of the things that I noticed, I I was able to see patterns, and
Mm-hmm.
I got very good at understanding, okay, well, if this is a pattern, what's my place in it and how do I stop doing it? And that
Mm.
got us into something else that we talked about just a little bit that I want to investigate a lot further with you about intellectualizing our feelings instead of
Oh,
feeling.
yes.
So I definitely want to have another conversation. I took some notes about that because I think that that's another thing that, from my understanding, from the audience that I have, and also from what I've been through, you have, I don't want to think about it, talk about it at all. So you avoid the whole thing altogether, or you might get a little bit too into it and think about it all the time, which makes it very difficult also to push through and be able to start something new. So one of the things that that I would love to also offer you, those 3 S's. That's fantastic as something for us to get started in the new year, as you're transitioning from the hectic, busy holiday schedule and trying to catch up on all this stuff. One of the things that happens to me is that when I'm in the middle of all these different projects or something going on, my day-to-day life takes a little bit of a back seat. And then I have to
Mm-hmm.
catch up with the dishes and the laundry and all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any hints or tips for us to be able to not feel just completely overwhelmed in that transition time period from here is what was the holidays are. I was so exhausted from the things that I was doing, but I was also very energized. I got to spend a lot of time with my kids and my grandchild that I haven't seen for a while. So I had 2 things being true at the same time. I was very full. I was also very
Mm-hmm.
tired. And then
Mm-hmm.
taking that stance and then moving forward, trying to just get into another routine and everything. Well, do you have anything that you can share with us that would help us to transition when we're going through a period of one thing, how to get back into just regular normal life and incorporate new things? A lot of times it's very difficult to even just do, as you were saying a little while ago, as you're doing your full-time job and you're coming home, there's not a lot of time left over. And sometimes it can feel like, oh my goodness, you're asking me to do one more thing, but it's just to be able to create the life that you want.
Mm-hmm.
So how do we carve out time? How do we stay energized? What kinds of things can we do?
That's a great question too, and there's probably a million wonderful answers to that. But I will share with you one of the things that I changed recently, that I shifted, and that's really helping me because I read several years ago the book Atomic Habits by James
Oh,
Clear.
yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
and I love that book, and I love the way he writes. He writes so beautifully, and I've never been able to read um, a book like that from cover to cover and really enjoy the whole thing. 'Cause sometimes I get really bored with that type of writing, like, like a you know what I mean.
Yes.
But he writes so beautifully, and he's not the only expert that discusses these things. I'm sure you've heard of this before. Ariana Huffington discusses this a lot too. And it's called micro habits, or micro steps. And I've heard about it and I've intellectualized it. Like you said, I've learned what it is. And like, okay, if
Mhm.
I just, even if I want, I came home from work today. My house was in disarray. I I wanted to get things ready for our call. I want to plan for my business and look at my calendar and make sure my coaching clients for the rest of the week I'm good and we're set up. And I had business things to do. I had my regular work day, and I have people coming over Friday after work. When am I going to get this house cleaned? Because it looks like a hurricane came through it. So what I have started doing, and by the way, that's a typical week for me. I don't have people over every Friday, but I'm one of my things this year is that I'm devoted to having a little more fun in my life and a little more
Love that.
whimsy. And so that
Good.
means more time with friends and enjoying. And
Mhm.
that requires that, by the way, if the house isn't perfect when my friends come over, that's going to be okay with me. I'm going to
Mhm.
be okay with that. And before, I would not have been, because one of my kind of like one of the ways I overcompensate for my ADHD is with OCD in certain areas of my life. So I will get hyper focused and completely obsessive compulsive about, for example, house cleaning, to the point where I will put house cleaning over paying bills, or house cleaning over
Mhm.
important things that I need to be doing, let's say, for example. So I realized that, okay, I am going to take this concept of micro steps or micro habits, and I am going to, for the first time in my life, allow myself to clean one corner of the house at a time. And by corner, I don't literally mean just a tiny corner. I mean like, okay, just the dining room and the corners around it. That's all
Mhm.
that gets cleaned today. Tomorrow, it'll be the downstairs bathroom and maybe sweeping and mopping the downstairs floor. Um, the next Thursday, I will do all the dusting. And by the time they come on Friday, everything they're going to see is going to be in place and look clean. And it's okay if I don't get to the upstairs. But in the past, if I knew people were coming over, I would want to clean my entire house, even areas they weren't going to see, because that was my OCD. And so that would take 8 or 9 hours for me to do by myself. Yes, I have adult-sized kids, but they both go to school and work part-time jobs too. And so they do a little bit around the house to help me, but I had to be in control of that. That was something that only I could do, and which was kind of silly. But I would kill myself and come home after a long day at work, and literally, Christine, I would want to clean the house from top to bottom. And if I only got 4 hours of sleep that night and went to work the next day because of it, so be it. But I
Mm.
realize now that, right, that's not a healthy perspective for a lot of reasons. Number one, my friends are my friends. And if my house is a little messy or a little dusty or whatever, they're not going to stop being my friend.
Mhm. That's
Huge
true.
revelation. And they're not going to think any less of me. And they know everything that I do. They support everything that I do. They know my kids. It's going to be okay if the house isn't perfect. And also, I now have taught myself to just clean the one little bathroom and stop for the night. And tomorrow, I will do a little bit more and I will take
Mhm.
up, pick up where I left off. So that's
Mhm.
what I mean by little micro habits means like doing a big project in little baby steps. And I
Mhm.
was before not comfortable with that because I have this all or none mentality that no, I can't just take
Mhm.
little baby steps. I got to get it all done. I can't just get my walking shoes on and walk for 5 minutes. I have to walk for 2.5 miles, like for it to count.
Mhm.
No, you can start by taking little baby actions for building momentum and getting things done. And when I learned to take off the cleaning gloves and put away the cleaning stuff after just getting the bathroom done, I was able to get enough sleep. Now I'm able to get enough sleep because I put a
Mhm.
time boundary around that. I'm able to not feel overwhelmed. And I don't allow myself anymore. I just don't allow myself to when I feel myself spiraling into that, I hold space. I calm myself by deep breathing or whatever, and I create a little plan for myself. Could be a micro plan, doesn't have to be, and it doesn't have to be written down, doesn't have to be formal, but I create the steps in my mind to say, oh, I can handle this because I can do it a different way. So I've really had to learn to, and that's one of the concepts of neuroplasticity, right? Allowing ourselves to solve problems in different ways. And
Mhm.
that problem of overwhelm, now I am comfortable in breaking things down into smaller pieces, and I allow myself to do that.
There's
Again,
something about
without
giving
judgment.
yourself permission to do that.
Yeah.
One of my therapists had noticed a pattern that I had a similar issue, that I felt that I had to do something from start to finish. I couldn't do it in small steps. And this
Mm-hmm.
goes back to what we were talking about a little while ago about I would never expect my children to be able to do something like that. I would never expect them to do that. This Thanksgiving, I was so occupied. I had all this stuff. I cooked the entire meal in one day. I do not suggest that. I
Oh my
was
goodness.
exhausted. And that's actually not 100% true. I did make the gravy a couple of days ahead, but that was
Oh
it.
my gosh, that was it.
And I do everything homemade, stuffing and all that stuff. So
How wonderful.
I I understand the power of giving yourself permission. It sounds so simple and almost silly, but it's not. It's
It's
not at
not.
all.
It's
Understanding that difference of the expectations that
mhm.
we have of ourselves sometimes is just unrealistic. We would never, ever expect anybody else to do those things, and we have to remember that and give ourselves permission to do things slowly or incomplete.
Mhm.
We don't ha it doesn't
Incomplete.
have
It
to
doesn't
be,
have to
yeah, it doesn't
finish.
have to be
Yes.
perfect. It just
Mhm.
needs to be started.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So that's been a huge shift for me because I have really struggled with that for so many years of probably all my
Mhm.
adult life. And I'm only now more recently, like in the last 6 months, becoming more comfortable with this concept and making it a conscientious choice that this is how I want to live. And this is how,
Mhm.
this feels good. This feels okay. This feels,
Yeah.
and when I say okay, I don't mean like it's just okay. I mean like, oh, I am okay.
But there's something about safety, and this is a whole I've got a whole
Oh,
bunch of
yes.
topics that I wanna talk to you about, creating that safety inside of us. So when you said it's okay, that's kind of the the feeling that it gave me, is that, when we give ourselves permission to do certain things, it's kind of reassuring, and it
Hmm.
creates, a lot of peace inside. If you really will give yourself permission and you'll do it, and your why
Hmm.
is big enough, then it does create that safety and that peace where you're not feeling as overwhelmed. You may still
Hmm.
realize you have a lot to do, but it does help your brain not to go in too many directions at the same time. At least that's how it works for me.
Yes. Yes, exactly. So that's a huge part also of um healing from a lot of, we talked about this briefly the other day in our conversation, but I think that also goes hand in hand. It reminds me very much of the, healing from traumatic thought processes. Like
Mhm.
we have these ingrained little micro traumas in us, and that's where a lot of our self-judgment comes from. That's
Mhm.
where a lot of our, negative self-talk comes from. And if
Mhm.
we don't allow ourselves to feel safe in our own brain, where else are we ever going to feel safe? In your own heart, in your own brain, right? That's why it's so important, because you are the keeper of that. No one can read your mind and read your heart, but you know what's in there. And
Mhm.
you are gifted with the ability to comfort your heart, to love your heart, to accept your heart and your thoughts. When I say heart, I mean all of the internal, mental, and emotional, the intellectual side and the spiritual side and the emotional side. Like that, what a wonderful, privilege that we have, that we are able to curate that within ourselves. And
Mhm.
we can make the choice to continue to abuse it, if you will, in form of judgment, or we can choose to love it and take exquisite care of it and allow it to grow and flourish and thrive.
I
So
love it.
it is a
Yeah.
choice, but sometimes it's so subconscious, and it takes having these deep conversations to
Mhm.
to shake us up a little bit.
Well, for me, with the life coaching with Tanya Lee, suggesting that we have an opportunity to think whatever we want about certain things.
Mhm.
That was a bit of a game changer for me, as on the heels of everything that you're talking about now, of it being a choice. We can't change our circumstances. That's just not possible, but we can change the way that we think about them. And if we can remove the judgment of our own actions and give ourselves the space and permission to grow, it can allow for a lot of really special things to happen. And where, that connection between your heart and your mind and everything coming together. And for me, that feeling of peace was something that was missing from my life for so long, that I crave it. And it was a beautiful thing to realize that I had the power, just like Dorothy. I had the power all along to be able to do it. But it's not something that just comes. It does take practice. It does
Mhm.
take effort and work, but it's the best effort and work that I have done for myself and for others.
Yeah.
Thank you
Yeah.
so much for all of your insight. I have a lot more that I want to talk to you about.
I love it. I could talk on this stuff forever.
Oh, well, I'm
Yeah.
very excited to have you on the podcast today, and I look forward to working with you in the future for more.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thank you,
so much.
Christine. It's an honor, and I really enjoy our time together. Every time
Oh,
we
thank
connect, it's fun, and it really just fills my cup, and I'm so happy and grateful for you. I'm grateful that we're friends, and happy to have you and be on your journey and share this with you.
Well, thank you so much, and I really appreciate your perspective, and it's such a beautiful thing to be able to share this sort of a platform, and to be able to share conversations that lift people up and to encourage,
Yes.
and coming from a place of have seen a thing or two because we
Yeah.
know a thing or two. And I just want to thank you so much for your willingness to share today on the podcast, and I look
Sure.
forward to working with you again.
No, me too. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.